Good evening. On behalf of the South African Reserve Bank, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Welcome to the 2024 Talk to the SARB edition. We are really grateful that you could come and brave the cold weather outside and actually spend your evening with us. As the South African Reserve Bank, these Talk to the SARB forums are truly what we look forward to. My name is Mahlatse, and I will be your program director this evening. As I said, Talk to the SARB forums are very important opportunities for us as the South African Reserve Bank. They give us an opportunity to engage with South Africans. We go to every single province across South Africa to engage. But I have something to tell you. The Soweto edition is our most special one. And for 2024, we decided to start with the engagement here in Soweto. Thank you very much for joining us, and I think you can give yourselves a round of applause. The Talk to the SARB forums are not just about engaging with you about monetary policy decisions that you hear the governor and members of the MPC make every second month, but we would like to talk to you about all of the work of the Reserve Bank. It could be the supervisory work we do, the work we do for financial stability, the payment system, or also our currency. So we are looking forward to all of your questions. As you can see this evening, we have a full panel of our MPC. And this is why I tell you that Soweto is a special one. I'm going to be introducing to you our panel, and I'm going to start on the far left, a very familiar face to all of you, Governor Lesetja Kganyago. DG, next to him is DG Rashad Kasim. Next to him is DG Fundi Chasibana. She is also the CEO of the Prudential Authority. A new face to the Monetary Policy Committee, DG Mampo Modise, who joined the South African Reserve Bank on the 1st of April. Welcome, DG, to the Soweto edition. Another familiar face, of course, is the head of our economic research, so the economic research department within the South African Reserve Bank, Chris Lewald. And then next to Chris, another new face, a new member of the Monetary Policy Committee. This is David Fawkes. He is the advisor to the governors. Can we give them a round of applause? As I said, today is about you, the residents of Soweto, and you get to set the agenda. But before that, I would like to hand over to Governor Lesetja Kganyago for his opening remarks. Governor.
Thank you very much, Mahlatse, and good evening, Soweto. Just to re-emphasize what Mahlatse said about the importance of the Talk to the SARB forum in Soweto. Apart from the National Monetary Policy Forum, this is the only Talk to the SARB forum where you have the full MPC attending. The period post the lockdown had been characterized by rising prices and the rising cost of living and elevated inflation. South Africa was no exception. We did experience a rise in inflation, which peaked at 7.8% in 2022. Of course, the rise in inflation necessitated a response from the South African Reserve Bank as an institution tasked with price stability. Inflation remained sticky and only came close to the midpoint of our inflation target range last year. But it soon started to creep up, and it's only this year that it had once again declined, and it declined to a level of 5.2%. Last week, the Monetary Policy Committee left the policy rate unchanged for the simple reason that we believed that the monetary policy stance is restrictive enough that it would enable the South African Reserve Bank to reach the inflation target in due course. As a matter of fact, we expect that inflation will return back to target in the late first quarter, early second quarter of next year. And this picture is slightly better than what we were expecting at the time of the March Monetary Policy Committee. Getting there, though, is likely to be a bumpy, difficult path. The environment is still very uncertain. The global financial conditions are tight, but what we are actually experiencing is that inflation is still elevated even in the advanced economies. You have a generation in the advanced economies that had only known low inflation, almost close to zero, and have also only known interest rates that are close to zero. That environment changed in 2022, and the world over, you are having the public that is increasingly intolerant of high inflation because they had experienced a decade of very low inflation. And when you have low inflation, of course, you end up with low interest rates. And that is what the world had experienced. But that picture changed in 2022 as inflation rose, as the world was opening up post the lockdown. The growth front is not encouraging either. The global economy is still expected to grow, but at a slower pace than was initially expected at the beginning of the year. Today, we also received growth figures in South Africa, which then said that growth shrunk in the first quarter of this year by 0.1%. And this, of course, had reflected an impact that we had experienced with respect to load shedding and logistics constraints. We expect the situation to be different in the second quarter because the second quarter was also characterized by at least 60 days of no load shedding, and that we expect that would make a difference. However, as I had said in a number of occasions, before tolerating high inflation in the hope that it will offer us sustainable economic growth is like observing or chasing a mirage. It is a false promise. So when businesses cannot expect stable prices, it becomes harder and harder for them to make investment decisions to grow or expand, and this throttles job creation. This is just one of the ways inflation is into and undermines growth. As the South African Reserve Bank, we will continue to do our utmost to execute our mandate, which is price stability in the interest of balanced and sustainable growth. We will continue to deliver on that mandate, irrespective of how our post-election politics plays out. Whatever the outcome in the next 2 weeks as the political parties jockey to form government, the SARB will continue to work with our colleagues in the National Treasury as well as fellow regulators, and we will continue to account to Parliament and continue to work for the economic betterment of all South Africans. As you had been listening in the lead up to this session, one of the ways in which we continue to work on the betterment of South Africans was through the recent launch on the 1st of April of the Corporation for Deposit Insurance. CODI's introduction explicitly protects covered depositors to an amount of up to 100,000 in the event that their bank fails. That means that ordinary South Africans can, with the same peace of mind, place their money in a number of banks, including smaller banks, that might offer them a better interest rate on their deposit than in a big established bank, encouraging the increase in competition in the sector. The South African Reserve Bank had been working for South Africans in other ways. The Prudential Authority, which regulates financial institutions, continue to ensure that our banks and insurance companies and market infrastructures are sound and safe. The work cannot be underestimated. The 28 banks that we regulate have balance sheets totaling almost 8 trillion rand. The 159 regulated insurance companies' balance sheets total almost 4.5 trillion rand. So the scale of our supervisory role notwithstanding, we continue to support the financial sector's growth and development. So, as we can see, we do not take our role lightly, and everything that we do is done in the service of South Africa. On that note, I'd like to now hand you back to Mahlatsi, who will open the floor. I've just given you a flavor so that you can ask questions about the activities of the South African Reserve Bank.
Thank you very much, Governor Lesetja Kganyago. As we go on, we are now going to be opening the floors to members of the audience. As I said, this is your opportunity to set the agenda. All questions are welcome, and we will direct them to members of our panel. If you could just raise your hands so that my colleagues can bring the mic to you. We'll take 4 questions at a time and then take it to our panel members to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Governor. My name is Bheki Events Twala. I'm the founder and the president of the Township Economic Commission SA. We really appreciate the opportunity. Governor, I just want to check, in terms of the programs for SARB, for township economy, and also the challenges that the township economy is facing, the main challenge of the access to funding, and you know the red tape and the difficulties of businesses to access funds from the banks. What role is SARB is playing to make sure that we then try to ease that challenge? Because we are now saying it's a great opportunity for us to meet with you, engage with you directly. We're also encouraging if we can get more of this so that we can have one-on-one. But we really appreciate the opportunity to come and engage with SARB directly. We wish you all the best. We're following you, but we make sure that as township economy, we are committed to grow this economy of our country. Thank you.
Okay. There's a question there.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Dan Mahasha. First of all, then I just want to congratulate the Governor, Lesetja.
If you could just put your mic closer so that we can hear. Thank you. Yes.
What I'm saying is, first of all, I just want to congratulate for reappointment of the Governor. I believe it's from effective from November. He'll be still carrying on managing the South African Reserve Bank. Post-election 29 May, the governor raised growth. I don't know how, unless there's a free market economy, which I think it was ignored or neglected by the current regime. Unemployment, poverty, rural economy is in line with township economy. If you round countrywide, our rural areas, it's a disaster. Are we cash nation going back to Africa, 1957? Hardly 30 years. We should have learned from Africa. The rating agency in the country. Right now, the country, we are going to have a new government. I don't know who's going to be the new government. Coalition is the route to go. If yes, put the people and the country first, not the individuals. That's my concern, the governor. Thank you. By the way, as a matter of interest, we've been together when I was the DG Treasury in Black Management Forum, way back.
Way back. Thank you very, very much.
Way back. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. There's another question on the second row here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lesetja. I'm a skills development practitioner by profession. I just have 3 deposits very quickly to the governor, and perhaps the panel as well will choose which questions they take. Just 3 quickly. The first one is a touchy subject in Kganyago. We look at it on television, but nobody wants to give a consensus on what needs to happen. In relation to undocumented foreign nationals, can you kindly characterize on how they directly hurt the rand? Because we hear about it on set, we argue about it in townships, but nobody wants to come forth to say, what do we do with our fellow brothers and sisters? They are really hurting the rand, but in the interest of the public, just characterize how they directly hurt the rand so that we are able to have fruitful discussions when we go back home. The second one is in relation to the current fiasco. Now, looking at the possible national coalition of these parties, what are investors currently looking at? And what are the things that will say they are a raw deal for investors currently on a national coalition government? Of course, as a businessman, I'm also panicking a bit. Nobody knows what results this will give, but maybe from an expert point of view, looking at a coalition government, what are the characteristics that will send away our investors in SA? And the third one, lastly, can you kindly just also characterize how political instability directly impacts the rand? Because time and again you hear that political parties, there are inputs in there, but you know, as a father seated there at home and my child asked, Dad, how does political infights actually influence the rand in the interest of the public? Those are my 3 deposits. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I take the last one here, and then we will hand over to the panel to answer? Okay, are you? Okay, we'll take you in the second round. Thank you, sir.
My name is Peter Matlante. I'm the CEO of Greek Finance Corporation. I just want to find out from the panel, there's this new thing coming up of NBIs, non-banking institutions. I just want to find out how perhaps the bank can help that this NBI initiative can be supported by micro-banking, if you can facilitate the formation of micro-banks, so that when the money is being advanced, the borrowers can be assisted to invest as well. Because I don't think the economy will grow properly if people continue to rely on loans, borrowing, without the discipline to invest. So if there could be this twin matching of the two, then you could be able to say to the borrower and say, listen, you are borrowing, but you must have a sustainable investment so that at the end of this cycle of borrowing, next time you can use your own money. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Governor, can I hand over to you and you can decide which members of the panel take the different questions?
Thank you very much. There are only two of us from the rural area, so we are going to have to deal with the rural questions. And Fundi, you grew up in a township, so I'm going to give you the question about the township economy. But more seriously, Ntate Beki, I'd missed the surname, so I will just refer to you as Ntate Beki. You asked the question about the program that we would have for the township economy, and then in particular, the access to finance and what role the South African Reserve Bank plays. I think it is important to understand the institutional setup in the South African finance space. You have a central bank, and it is called central for a reason. And that is because it has to look after the whole system. But the point that you are raising, which is actually very important about access to finance, because the access to the finance is not coming through the central bank, it comes through either the commercial banks or through the development finance institutions. And so, but you raise an important point then about what the role of the bank is. And our role is to make sure that the institutions that roll out those services to borrowers, that roll out those services to savers, are safe and sound. And such that when you are a saver and you have placed your deposit with an institution, you would know that your savings is safe. And in a way, we ended up having to come in with the Corporation for Deposit Insurance precisely to give you that peace of mind. The issue you are raising, which is access to finance, and the term we prefer in the South African Reserve Bank is access to financial services, otherwise also known as financial inclusion, which is captured as part of this, as part of the regulatory goals, which then says that you mobilize savings, that is the one component, so we protect that. But you asking the access, and it links back to what Ntate Matlanti had raised, which says that if you are lending money, you would like to make sure that people are using that money for investment because that is what we actually need. And part of the work that the banks or the lenders have to do is to assess, when you say you are going to be investing, that your investment is viable, meaning it will generate resources, profits, such that you are able to service the loan that you had actually had taken. One of the things, though, that had struck me in this is that in our space, there are so many lenders at play, and they are quite happy to give you a personal loan, whatever you are going to use the money for. It's easier to get money for a personal loan than to get money for a small business enterprise. And so it looks like we are biased towards lending money for consumption, which is the gripe that Ntate Matlanti is raising here. Can we move to the point where The money is lent, but it is being channeled to investment. And that is where the business people actually come in. So that is us and the banks. But we are not the complete picture in that. There are the development finance institutions which are overseen by various government departments, whether it's the development, whether it is the Industrial Development Corporation, the Small Enterprise Development Agency, and so forth. They play that role of filling in where the commercial banks fail, that they must fill into that space. And we are correct here in raising the question about how they come to the fore in making sure that businesses have access to finance. And I cannot overemphasize this. I mean, we commend people like yourself who were talking about township and rural businesses, because we have got this obsession as South Africans that we want to create jobs, and it is important we create jobs. But it is through the creation of businesses that people would be employed. And if we change our national narrative to say our focus should be on creating jobs, on creating businesses, we will solve our job creation problem. But we keep on talking about creating jobs. And so that becomes important. But Dr. Matlanti also raised the issue of non-bank financial institutions and the creation of, yes, now non-bank financial institutions, we also call them, yes. And that space for us as regulators is a varied space. There are so many of these players, and so many of them do not even fall without the purview that we actually oversee. But what I have said about what the banks lend for, these non-bank financial institutions, we could be asking exactly the same thing. Because if they channel their resources towards investments, to funding businesses, it is through that grow the economy, and by so doing actually create jobs. But I'm sure my colleagues here will attend many of these global meetings about non-bank financial institutions, would like to add to that. Let me then deal with the questions of Ndate Mahasha, who says that have we learned from the African continent? One of the former presidents had this to say in 1996. He was not president then, but he had this to say. We have the benefit of having a leadership that had spent time all over the world and all over the African continent. We have learned from the mistakes that had been made elsewhere in the world and on the African continent. And he said, if we commit exactly the same mistakes committed on the African continent or elsewhere, generations that come after us should never forgive us, because we cannot claim that we didn't know. Yet in the current discourse in South Africa, you still hear narratives of this and this has happened in this country, we can make it here, irrespective of how badly it was done there and irrespective of how much failure you have experienced there. And we think somehow all these policies that had failed elsewhere in the world, we as South Africans, we are so special, we can make them to work. It doesn't follow. It would not happen. Policies that had failed elsewhere in the world, we should learn from that. They will fail here too, and we shouldn't be trying them. And you raised then the issue of the rating agencies and the politics and how this affect us. The rating agencies, when they rate a country, consider a number of factors. Amongst those are the institutions of that society, of that country. And whether the institutions are designed in such a way that there are checks and balances and that they are able to manage contestation. And they would look at the process that the country follows in electing its leaders. It will look at how legal disputes are settled, whether they are done through the courts and so forth. It look at how that country manages its economy and whether the policies that the country adopts are which cannot be sustained going forward. And if those policies cannot be sustained going forward, as the public, we have got to be able to ask the questions. And one of the things that rating agencies then consider is whether you live within your means, within your available resources, or whether you overextend yourself. And countries tend to overextend themselves by spending more than what they earn in taxes, and thus have to borrow the difference. What happens is the excesses of today's generation are putting burdens on generations that come after us. And we leave the generations that come after us with debt that they are going to struggle to service. Don't get me wrong. It is okay to borrow, like Ntate Matlanti was saying. If you are borrowing for investment, it's okay. And it is the same for countries too. If the country borrows money to invest in its people and invest in its infrastructure, and thus is going to realize better growth, it is okay to borrow for that. But if we are borrowing to consume, we will not be able to sustain it. I will leave it there without passing a judgment about whether we have borrowed to invest or whether we have borrowed to consume. You can make the judgment. You can make the judgment there. And it is on that basis that the rating agencies will assign a rating to you. There were lots of opinion polls prior to last week that was going to say how our political configuration is going to look like. My days, my father-in-law liked watching the news, and what he was watching on a Saturday is the outcome of the horse racing. And he used to start it by saying, "Apela mapupo." And in a way, you could say this about this, "Apelile amapupo," because there is now only one poll that matters, is the one that took place on Wednesday. And this is what we are faced with. We are in an environment where we are going to end up with coalitions. And you correctly put it. Would it be possible to have something that would put people first? I leave that to the political leadership. What I can tell you is what we do as the South African Reserve Bank, we put people first. The thing that came was the impact of what these coalitions would mean for, how it would impact on the investors. The only impact is what kind of policies will any coalition come with and whether those policies are sustainable. If the policies are not sustainable, we might not have the investment. If they are sustainable, we will talk about a different picture. But that is for our political leadership to make those calls. Political instability and its impact on the rand. There is one thing we can say about South Africa. We are a democracy. Some people will say we are a noisy democracy. We have had contestations, but South Africa cannot be characterized as politically unstable. We shout at each other, we contest, we say all sorts of things, we might have demonstrations, we might have whatever, but South Africa cannot be characterized as being politically unstable. We are a vibrant democracy. And so, the issue of political instability, if we had political instability, yes, it would impact on the rand. But political instability is not what we have at the moment. We have contestation, but contestation does not mean political instability. After I said that I will give you some of these questions, it looks like I answered all of them. Is there anything that anybody wants to add?
There's a question around undocumented foreign nationals.
We've not done any work of the sort, but that is exactly the problem. You see, they are undocumented, so we don't even know how many there are. But from intuition, I do not see how that would affect the rand, but we do not know about that.
Did you want to? Go ahead.
Thanks. There's one question from Abuti Lesetja on the what investors are looking for. Basically, investors are very similar to rating agencies. They judge you based on your own policies and on your own targets. So for now, from the conversations that we've been having, they want to see how the elections go. Are they, is there instability? Is it not? They're looking for whether post-elections we can still implement the policies that we have. Are we going to be able to deal with load shedding? Is fiscal policy going to continue to consolidate? So basically they're looking at how we continue post-election in implementing some of the reforms and some of the policies that we have.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll open for the second round of questions. There was a question on the third row here and another one on the fifth row. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tanya Kekana. I'm a director of an organization for farmers in South Africa. And what is the challenge here, which maybe we can ask how the Reserve Bank can help us, is that as an organization for farmers, we have a lot of projects from poultry to crop production. But what our farmers are having as a challenge is finance. And when they approach the institution, it's a very high mountain to climb. And those are the people we believe that if the bank can invest in them, then they create more jobs. We're leading more than 1,000 membership where farmers are committed to what they're doing. That's number one. Number two, as farmers, we actually, due to the challenges that we get in our organization, we want to establish a bank. We regard that as a cooperative bank, a farmers' cooperative bank. Now, we are at a stage where we started to contribute towards the establishment of the bank. Then we would appeal to your intervention. How can you assist us? Because we're in that process. We are just funding ourselves, but we wanted to know how the Reserve Bank can help in assisting us, capacitating us in order to be on the right track when you formulate this cooperative bank. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. There is a question behind you, and then we will be coming back to the front. Yes, I think that's it. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Congratulations, Governor, to your reappointment. My name is Bitumelo Dilapisho, an employee at City of Johannesburg. My question it will be, does NHI, it will work for us, for this country? Question number two, how far would the State Bank? Question number three, does Rupert's and Oppenheimer's and private Gordon influencing our Reserve Bank and our economy? Does Orania take a part in our economy. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a question in front. Okay, we'll come back. Can we get there and then we take another one there?
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Governor, welcome back to Soweto, the birthplace of NAVCOC, the birthplace of the Stockfell Association. We have been led by giants like Bontate Maponya, Bontate Mtswenyane. The last time I was in your presence, Governor, we were at the memorial service here in Ntate Mtswenyane, where it was said in black and white that his wishes was that African Bank needs to go back to its founders. And I'm here to say, despite being disappointed by your staff, because I wanted to send my letter to you beforehand, but they did not, they ignored my emails. My point is this, Governor, and your leadership. We want to thank you for making sure that African Bank stays afloat. You've done your part. We believe, Hori, our time has come. As people from townships and villages, the time has come for us to take back African Bank back into black hands. KGB has done a marvelous job of ensuring profitability of the institution. But what he's not aware of is that when you come to townships, you are finding a lot of loan sharks that are preying on the poverty of our people. They are preying on that you are giving what we know as SASA grant. And that's why we believe that in the course of us mobilizing Batuba grant, we are forming them into cooperatives so that we can be able to ensure, like you are rightfully saying, that we are not a nation of consumers, but a nation of business people. My name is Mputi. I'm with Soweto Business Access, and I'm here to formally give you, Ntate Lesetja, a mandate that I got from the taxi associations, a mandate that I got from the Stockfells, a mandate that I got from ordinary mothers, churches that are saying the time has come for African Bank to come back to its owners, people in townships. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Nicele. I'm from College News. I've got two simple questions, Mr. Governor. Are you able to divulge how much is the Reserve Bank, how much is Reserve Bank worth in terms of revenue and total net asset? Question two, I know you still have another couple of years to be at the helm. I just want to find out from you personally, do you think you still have the energy and the vigor to continue for another 2 terms? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Governor, can we answer those and then we will open up for the final round? Governor, over to you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I've been remiss. Lots of people have been congratulating me. I didn't say thank you for all the congratulatory messages. It is truly humbling. Thank you very much. And okay, we'll be taking these questions, and I'm going to start distributing them, and then I will deal with the others. Babacele's question about how much is the SARB worth, I'm going to give that to DG Kasim. And Rashad, you can also deal with the return of African Bank to the people and the process that we are going through to make sure that that actually happens. And I particularly welcome the initiative that is being taken of mobilizing those savings to make sure that you would be ready for that. But Rashad will will deal with that. Fundi, if you can deal with Buitumelo's question about where is the state bank, where are we with the state bank, and these two powerful families that apparently are having influence all over the country. What influence do they have on the South African Reserve Bank? Unfortunately, there's none of us from Orania here, and so, but where is Orania in the bigger scheme of things? It might be a statistical question, so I might have to give that to you. And then let me deal with a question of Ndatikikan. I will deal with one part of your question. The other one about how to assist you with cooperative banks, DG Fundi will deal with that. She's got a unit that just helps institutions with that. She will deal with that. The financing of farmers. Last year, the Land Bank would have turned 110 years. It was formed in 1913. And people just refer to as the Land Bank, but the actual name is the Land and Agricultural Bank of South Africa, the Land Bank. And the one thing the Land Bank had done always historically was to fund farmers, fund farms and so forth, except that prior to 1994, you had to be of a particular color for the Land Bank to fund you. The Land Bank also benefited from what the Reserve Bank does. The Land Bank would borrow money in the bond market, and the Reserve Bank will take the Land Bank paper as security, and that gave the Land Bank an advantage that the other banks do not have, because everybody was happy to buy Land Bank paper because they knew if you want cash, you can take that paper to the Reserve Bank, and the Reserve Bank would, over a period of time, advance you money via a bank, and then once that period expires and you repay the money, the Reserve Bank gives you your Land Bank bonds back, and you can always trade. And that made the Land Bank to have access to cheap money. Someone, either in the Land Bank or I do not know, thought that it might be a cool idea for the Land Bank not to repay its creditors. And because the Land Bank didn't repay its creditors, it faced a crisis. Nobody wanted its paper. Not even the Reserve Bank could now take its paper. And that became problematic. And now we are having to start a process of repairing the Land Bank, trying to restore it, and that takes time. Just think of it, even wherever you are. Think of somebody that you lend money, and that person decided that they are not repaying you, and they come back to you and says, trust me this time and lend me money. I mean, the first thing I will ask is, can we start where we finished? Can you repay me first? Then I can talk about advancing you more money. And probably after you have repaid me, I will say, thank you very much. Now I know how you behave. I'm not lending you money again. And that, in a way, is what the Land Bank is faced with now, having to restore its credibility so that it can continue the business of funding farmers. It had all sorts of other windows, and one of the sad things of the past 5 years also was that the commercial banks started to eat the Land Bank's lunch because it seemed that if you had a viable farm, it was easier for you to get money from a commercial bank than you get from the land bank. And as you were saying about farmers with all sorts of plans in poultry and in all of that stuff, that it is not just about the viability of the farms, but it is important those farms are viable. But importantly, it is about our food security. That you actually need to make sure that the farming industry thrives because farmers feed the nation. And this notion that we have of our kids who think that food is from the supermarket and not from the land is problematic. And so even where we have small patches of land, it might be useful to grow a few vegetables just to change the psyche of our children. That food is not from the supermarket. Food comes from the ground. That becomes important for me. But Rashad, shall we go that route?
Thank you very much. So the question of what is the value of the central bank is a very complicated question for a number of reasons. You can't, like a private company, say, this is Standard Bank, this is its market cap in the stock market, and this is what Standard Bank is worth. So if someone wants to buy Standard Bank, this is the valuation of Standard Bank. In the case of the South African Reserve Bank, as is the case with many central banks, if you look at, for those of you who are interested, we put a lot of effort into the SARB annual report, and you can see, for those of you who have a flair for accounting, you can see how complicated it is. For example, in 1 year, we could be having a loss of minus 5 billion rand. So we're actually running at a loss if you look at the income statement of the central bank. The next year, we could make a profit of 7 billion rand. And the reason we make this loss and profit is because we make decisions that are important to the economy and not decisions that is trying to maximize the shareholder value of the bank as you'd have in a private firm. So if you look at the asset side, if you're interested in our assets and liabilities, if you look at the asset side of the central bank, you will see that we have $60 billion, somewhere in that order, of foreign reserves. And that $60 billion of foreign reserves at today's exchange rate is over 1 trillion rand. In a more stronger currency, that value will come down. We have some other things on our balance sheet. We own buildings and so on and so on. And then we have liabilities, all the money circulated in the economy and so on. So that is why it's very hard to value a central bank, because a lot of the actions we take. So you may ask the question, why is it that you're sitting with $60 billion in reserves? It goes back to the original question about the rand. Sometimes, in order for us to kind of get oil, we need dollars. There may be times when there's a crisis. In a country like Sri Lanka, the central bank only had $5 billion worth of reserves. The economy came to a standstill. Firms needed money for fuel. They had to import it, but there was only $5 billion left in the central bank, and in the process, they had to declare public holidays so that people don't use their cars because they can't get much oil or petrol. So that is a very roundabout way of saying we can't tell you in a straightforward. We can give you some numbers, what's on the asset side. We can give you what last year's profit was. You will get a sense when we come out with our next annual report what this year's profit is. But a profit today could be a big loss tomorrow because of our considerations. African Bank, the SARB has been wanting to sell African Bank. We're hopeful it could be a black consortium. And I think that initially we put it out there. We asked groups to raise money. Many consortiums struggled to raise money. We then followed what we call an IPO, an initial public offering.
But it is a real problem. The problem goes beyond the SARB of how do you raise money to claim the bank to what late Matsuyani originally wanted it to be. I think there's also a bigger issue, and I remember in past meetings like this, one of the real issues are we want diversity in this economy. We want people who have been historically disadvantaged to have prominent roles in every part of the economy, whether it's finance, whether it's mining. The question is a black bank, so-called black bank, will a black bank behave differently from an established bank? And that's a big question. The big question is a bank, it plays by certain rules, and if we want to raise finance in poor areas, is this done through a bank? Other ways and means of raising finance? That's a bigger issue that we must have a debate about. In about whether our system, whether someone has a good idea, but no one's prepared to give that person money. Who comes in? Is it a bank? Is it government? Is it a financial institution that's geared like the IDC? This is a bigger question, or the SME, Department of Small and Medium Enterprise. These are bigger questions that we got to tackle. But let me leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, so let me tackle the question of the State Bank. The short answer is there is no application we are sitting with by the state for banking license. And the banking license process is exactly the same, whether you are a private entity or a government entity. You have to go through the exact same process, and we will ask the exact same questions of you. So do the shareholders have enough money to put into this bank for it to start? Because remember what a bank is. The bank is primarily a deposit-taking institution. So first, deposits must come in. And we need a security for the deposits to come in. And that is what we supervise and we make sure is always intact as the central bank. And that's the primary issue. And for that reason, you can't distinguish between government and a private entity, because when that bank fails, I need to know, is the money to pay you out as depositors, so that you can sleep very well at night knowing my money's in the bank, someone's looking after it, there is a board, there is a management that's making sure that my money is safe and is being taken care of. But we are awaiting that application. It is not yet with us. Ntate Kekana, on your question around setting up a cooperative bank, we are there to assist you around the process for the license application. There is another agency called the Cooperative Bank Development Agency, which is run out of the National Treasury. That is where the capacity building takes place. We're very happy to link you up together with them. Now, the reason why we, on the Prudential Authority side, can't help you is we can't help you and judge you at the same time. So we need a different group of people that give the help, and then we are the ones that then interrogate to see, are you ready? We also have an intermediate step. So if you're not ready yet to be a bank, you can be a cooperative financial institution, which is a slightly more informal structure, but it's still a deposit-taking structure. So very happy to share that information with you in terms of who you can talk to, because there is a lot of value when you have member-based organizations. And member-based organizations can do a lot for their members. There is power in pooling deposits. And member-based organizations can also grow to be as large as other banks. And we see this in other jurisdictions in terms of what it is that member-based organizations can do. So would really encourage you to come and talk to us. So in terms of influential families and what relationship they have with the central bank, I haven't seen any, and I'll talk from my purview since I've joined the Reserve Bank. So I got asked a question recently about private shareholders. Do they dictate to you? Actually, I hardly know who they are, and I sign so many share certificates that if you were to ask me who are the private shareholders of the Reserve Bank, there are many. Some of them are employees of the SARB, some of them are ordinary citizens. There's no cluster of big individuals that are there controlling and pressing and telling us what to do in the Reserve Bank. And the private shareholders come to vote. We will see them on the 30th of July. They will come in there to vote for board members, and they will come and vote for who the auditors of the South African Reserve Bank are, and that will be the last time that we see them. They do not tell the governors what to do. Our powers are defined in law. They do not tell the board what to do. The board has got specific responsibilities in terms of holding us accountable and making sure that we are doing what we're supposed to do in the SARB. I hope this helps.
Okay. That leaves.
And then NHI, we can't.
You want to answer? Who wants?
No, I want to run. I think Mampo wants to.
Mampo, you want to answer NHI?
From my previous role.
Okay,
she wants to help.
Let me wish you luck. Go ahead.
Thank you, Governor. We're talking NHI. NHI is a policy that is meant to provide fair across medical benefits, whether private or public. You must have the same treatment, you must get the same services. When the policy was initially discussed and the bill was being drafted by the Department of Health, there was money that was allocated for the pilot, and the pilot was aimed to see whether the system is ready to implement NHI or not. From the outcomes of the pilot, there's just 3 things that we need to do before we can even think of the rollout of NHI. The first one is to look at the governance and the management of our hospitals and the health sector as a whole. The second one was improving infrastructure, especially in big hospitals. There's hospitals where there hasn't been investment, and we need to boost those investments. And then thirdly, we have to find a way in which we deal with our procurement policies. There are hospitals who spend 100 for one medication, others will spend 1,000. That is not efficient, that is not effective, so we need to find a way to standardize and improve on the procurement processes. Now, once that is done and government boosts the level of hospitals and the services to a level that is comparative to the private sector, then we can start looking at the implementation of NHI. This is not a bad policy. Basically, it forces improvement in the public hospitals so that everyone gets a fair share of health services. So it's not a bad policy, but we still have a long way to do as the state to get us there.
All right.
Okay. No.
Governor.
There were two others. See, Datem Pudi doesn't just send a letter. He described what is in the letter.
Yes.
So just to finish off on what DG Kasim said about African Bank, when nobody could raise the money to buy African Bank, the route that we decided was that we will go the route of an initial public offering. And the route of an initial public offering means that you almost democratize the shareholding. So you're offering the shares to everybody. So whoever can buy 5 shares, 10 shares, somebody might be able to buy 1,000 shares. So the kinds of people that you are mobilizing whether they are in a church, in a stokvel, and so forth, continue to pool your savings so that when the shares are offered, you have got the pool to be able to buy those shares. And it was interesting because, you see, you were talking about NAFCOC being found here. But the idea of forming African Bank came out of the same conference. And the amounts that they started African Bank with were very modest. Very, very modest. And so the notion that just thinks that we should try and find billions and just try and swallow the entire stake of the Reserve Bank, knowing that we do not have that money, is problematic. Why don't we buy what we can afford to buy? And that is what an initial public offering would say. Whether those people who are starting a cooperative bank, who are pulling their savings together, people who are mobilizing in a stokvel and so, people might be even in a burial society who might decide that a portion of this, let us go and buy shares. The idea is to go out and have as many people as possible participating in this offering by African Bank. Of course, it would have been easier if you just had a consortium that comes and fetches this. And one of the things that we were worried about was, if you have, let's say, 5 bids, and we eventually decide on one, the history of this country is that somebody is going to say we was robbed. Fortunately for us, nobody could raise the money. So we then said, no, then open this thing up. Let everybody buy, even if they are buying in small chunks. We have got no interest holding on to this share holding. Firstly, it puts us in a conflict because we are regulating the sector and we shouldn't be owning the shares. We did it because we wanted to stabilize that bank. I think our role is done, and we would like to exit. We would like to exit that.
Yeah, I'm not in the hour. Accept me.
I do not know what you are talking about.
I supervise all that.
Yes, but there was a question also that said that we are having a problem with loan sharks and in the town. Those chaps, have got to be dealt with in accordance with the National Credit Act, and it should be reported to the National Credit Regulator. But it's just, this thing keeps on coming back to the same things. I have not heard of somebody who borrowed money from a loan shark to start a business. People go to the loan sharks because they want to consume, right? And that is our problem then in mobilizing. And I mean, I'm sure if you go to a loan shark and says that you would like to borrow money to start a business, they're going to look at you and says, you clearly do not understand the business because I am charging you far more than what you would have and you have paid elsewhere. And the concern about the people who are on social grants who are falling victim to this is actually a concern. There are abuses. These loan sharks, they visit pay points, and there are all sorts of bad practices of these people taking people's SASSA cards and all of that. Those things are illegal and they need to be nipped in the bud.
Governor, there is one more question that you didn't answer, which was, do you have energy for another term? But I can give you time. It can be your last answer for this session.
I thought by now I have demonstrated I've got a lot of energy.
There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to be able to network with you outside. So I'm going to take the last 3 questions, and then we will be closing the session. We haven't had an opportunity to go all the way to the back. I'm going to give my sister there an opportunity to ask a question, and then I'll take the gentleman on my far right and the gentleman in the red jacket. I think, yeah, you can go ahead, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much to the team that has come out to us. Thank you so much, Governor. My name is Thandelo Mahlase, CBC, and I'm from a company called Curiosity Hub. So a couple of years, I think about a decade ago, I made the suggestion during the tenure of Jill Marcus. And I made the suggestion to say, are we really doing enough to actually educate or inform, not inform, but educate the public about what the Reserve Bank actually does, the role of, yes, the central bank, when we are doing the MPC's, what's called the statement. There's so much noise around, let's say, the SONA And there's so much, I know even right now, last week you were announcing your MPC decision, but it was just one day after the election. And it's like, okay, everybody's just so focused on the election and there's a big buzz. So politicians are very good at making their statements, and even if they feed the public the wrong kind of information for the sake of votes. But isn't there anything also that the Reserve Bank can do in terms of trying to really, as we talk about financial inclusion, it's also about financial education. What's the depth of our financial education? Because if we're not necessarily educating people about the decisions that they're making, about responsible lending, about how we are actually able to use money better, if we are not talking about that, then there's no point. It's like, again, putting water in a bucket that has many holes. So, but how are we like trying to form some kind of a relationship between education, entertainment, and, you know, really going the mile? It's like Grey's Anatomy or Suits. How they just try to actually educate or inform the public about, it's very technical jargons, we understand, and it's a very technical field. However, we can try to somewhat bridge the gap so that people can better understand what are we talking about and how do interest rates actually work, the exchange rates. There's so much fake news, yes, we know, and false information spreads much faster than telling people, actually, guys, we need to work hard. We need, like we're talking about infrastructure changes, we need to study, we need to understand how do we, you know, do agriculture in order for us to, so yeah. Can we do not anything about it?
Thank you.
Dumelang bagaetsho, leina la ka ke Kagiso Mongae, I'm in a SME space. I think Ausi touched what I wanted to say. One of the things that I've jotted down here is, I was talking to Sydney outside that I've been in this space, banking space, but servicing the mine workers, one of the lowest group, I think, in our communities. So some of the things I can talk outside this forum. But what I've noticed is that when we have forums like this, there's always, because of the challenges we have as community, there's always some kind of like, we tend to be not relevant to what we are converging for on the particular day. So I would suggest that next time, if there are forums like this, let us include people like South African Development Bank, Financial Services Board, NCR, to be in one space so that every question that we ask get to be answered by the relevant people, and I think it will educate us, like my sister has said. The other thing is we have South African retail bonds. I once tried to get into that space and I was taken from pillar to post by post office. I want to know, where does it reside now? Okay. Because those are the things that can help us as community to make something for ourselves or for our children in terms of savings.
All right.
And the culture of savings is also something that's not within our community. Like where I'm coming from, we have a village bank, I think, so it's not working as it's supposed to work, but if we can have those things, many of those, I think even on the township, it can work.
All right,
Then
thank you.
lastly,
I need to give to the next, okay, literally
lastly,
the
I
last
wanted
one.
to ask about our currency.
Yes.
How long does our currency circulate, and is it circulating enough? If not, what is it that we as community and you can tell us to do? Because if it circulates enough, it's better for us.
All right, thank you very much. Last question for this round.
Salman, good evening. To the panel and to the governor, thank you for making time to be with our community today. My question is somewhat in line with the previous gentleman's question regarding retail bonds. The rule of thumb is that when the currency is not doing well on the exchange market, the bonds would actually be cheap, especially government bonds. What is the SARB doing to ensure that there's enough awareness in terms of the community as far as these bonds are concerned, in order also to improve accessibility within the stock market? I'm sure we know the stock market is probably 3% representative of historically disadvantaged people, which are black, to be quite frank. So in terms of the retail bonds, like the gentleman was asking, what is SARB doing to try and improve access? My second question is around capital flight. Most of our undocumented foreigners who are literally controlling township economy, they're not bankable, which means they're not taxable, which means they're not contributing to the country's fiscal. So as you guys sit on the panel, they're not paying your salaries, and they've got businesses in the country. So is the SARB not at all concerned with capital flight? If you are, what measures have you put in place to try and address that? Thank you so much. I'm from the Orlando East Business Forum Innovation, by the way. My name is Lambeni Foxo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Governor?
So we are going to abuse DG Mampo's institutional memory. I think he still remembers what happens at the Treasury. So I'm going to ask her to deal with the issue of RSA retail savings bonds. Chris and David, you know, you might have to start educating about capital flight and what it means. I'll leave it to the two of you to sort that out. And again, between the two of you, the other one must answer the question about the circulation of our currency, the circulation in the broader sense, not the notes that go here, in the actual circulation of the real money that people do not see. If we could deal with that, but you, DG Mampo, you still mark the scripts at the comment at UNISA, so you teach. So I'm going to also give you the question about education, about the stuff. You can't just teach the people at UNISA, you must also teach here. So I'm going to give that to you as well. And Fundi, if you deal with savings and the village banks falls in that category of the cooperative banks that you said you are from Motswedi. I think at one stage there was the village bank. That is the one that I knew that was a DFI. And I think that it had problems, and it is what actually prompted government to come with the Cooperatives Banks Act, so that the participants in these village banks, in these cooperative banks, could then be harnessed, and hence the creation of the Cooperative Banks Development Agency. DG Fundi, you could deal with that. So, who wants to start? Mampo, you start by educating.
I can start, Governor. I think the educating question, I'm going to respond to it as the... Yeah. So basically, Governor, I think the forums like this, such as the monetary policy forums, are one of many forums that the SARB has. We also do presentations to different institutions, even universities, when they ask us to come and present on specific topics. The latest one where we did a lot of public awareness is the Corporation for Deposit Insurance, which is something that is new, that was implemented. We went to different radio stations, we went to different TV stations to try and educate the South Africans on how it works. So I think what we need to do, Governor, is to consider more of the forums like this and also visit the schools. There's a MPC School Challenge, I think. That's another platform that we have in terms of educating. But I guess it's never enough. And every time when we have a new product, we might need to go on a big drive to make sure that we educate the nation. But what we do is some of these forums, we might need to advertise them better. We might need to reach more of the members of the society than what we have now, meaning fill up this hall than have the few people that we have. But that is something that we definitely have to take into consideration when we go back. Governor, the question on the retail bonds, if ubatla go tseba ka di retail bonds, the best place to go is 240 Madiba Street in Pretoria. That is the office of the National Treasury, and there's a retail bond section on the ground floor, and they have all the information. The retail bonds work exactly the same as the normal bonds, but of course they are smaller and they are targeted for the ordinary citizens. So of course when there's movement in the markets, they'll be impacted. But retail bonds are protected because they are government bonds, and you are guaranteed that you're going to get your investment back. What will fluctuate would be the interest that you get on your investment. But certainly the retail bonds team is pushing. They've also increased the limits. They've also changed that you can invest monthly. Before it was a once-off investment that you had to make. So they are improving on the bonds, and they are increasing access to the bond. But if you want information, the best place to go will be the National Treasury.
Chris?
Thank you. I'll try to add a little bit on the issue of education, and then I'll tackle capital flight as well as I can. I think it's right to say that the financial education landscape is very wide, and there are lots of different institutions that need to play a particular role in it, like the FISCA, like the NRC, NCR. For our part, what we try to do, in addition to the schools challenge, is that we try to publish as much as we can, and we run bursary programs to try to bring young people into the bank and interact with us on policy issues and research issues as much as we can. Transparency is the key, I think, to trying to get learning out the door. So we are, as you know, a big institution, lots of people, but it matters a lot that we produce publications like this Monetary Policy Review, like the Financial Stability Review. We publish all of our research papers, we publish a lot of our economic notes, and these are all meant to try to just be provided to the public for that kind of learning that you're talking about. And I think it's fair that to say that every institution that works in the financial environment should be trying to do the same thing as much as they can. It is a very large public benefit that we can provide and we need to provide. On the capital flight issue, so I guess there are two sides to this. One is, of course, in every economy there's a certain amount of something that looks like illegal activity where cash and money gets moved around by people outside of the normal banking sector. I think generally speaking, in most economies, the amounts that you're talking about are relatively small compared to what we see moving in and out through the banking system. And because South Africa is an open economy and we are financially integrated with the rest of the world, the amount of capital that comes in and the amount of investment that goes out, these are very large numbers indeed, and generally of benefit. So whether a South African resident invests in an overseas asset, you see money going out of the economy, but that money earns a return. It's an investment, and the money can come back, the returns come back into the economy. So when you look at the national account statistics and the balance of payment statistics, you're talking about very large amounts of money, and they go both ways. And that's very, very important for the economy as a whole. It's important for the growth rate over time, and it's important for the general wealth of the economy. But that is, the official side. That's through the banking system. The illegal side and the cash movements is a different thing, and it's very hard to come to grips with. It's not really, I think, strictly speaking, in our powers to try to manage that, although we try to keep some sense of how big those numbers are. Thanks.
Okay, great, thanks. I get to talk about currency and circulation. I'm just going to slightly latch on to what Chris was saying first, though. There was a comment at the end of that question that Chris was just speaking to from the gentleman at the top about how people aren't being taxed because they're in the some sort of hidden economy, and so our salaries aren't getting paid by them. And this is a common misconception. The Reserve Bank doesn't receive tax money from government. The Reserve Bank makes money. It's a profitable organization, and we give money to government. So I'm happy to say that there isn't tax money being used to pay our salaries. I just bring it up because people are always complaining to me, what are you doing with my tax money? But let me talk about currency and circulation. So this is so interesting. We see all these numbers. It's our currency. He's got to sign it. And at payday, a whole lot of money goes out of the vaults and goes into the economy. And we see the notes and coin in the economy rise to something like 170 billion rand as people get their salaries, go to the ATM, draw it out, and then they spend it. And for the sort of first 5 to 7 days after payday, there's lots of notes and coin out there circulating. And then it goes from the businesses to the banks. You don't earn any interest on notes and coins, so people don't want to hold it unnecessarily. So they put it in the bank brings that back to us, we give them what are called bank reserves instead, they can earn interest on those, and the supply of notes and coins goes down to about 150 billion rand or so, roughly speaking. And every month you get this kind of pattern. Now we see it and it all makes sense. What's really interesting in South Africa is the pattern used to do this. Every month it was a little bit higher than last month. The economy was growing and there's some inflation, so people need more money. And since about COVID, it's just been going sideways. There's just no growth in notes and coins anymore. And you see this in other economies. You see it in Brazil. You see it in some advanced economies. There've got to be a few things going on, but an important one is people don't feel safe with notes and coins. Like just carrying cash around seems to be an issue. And people can pay with their phones. They're new payment technologies. They're more efficient. So if you're interested in how notes and coin are behaving, the most interesting thing is that they're trending sideways. At the same time, broad money, the money supply in the economy, bank accounts, deposits, all of this, that's still growing. That's growing about in line with the economy. But actual physical cash, that's kind of going sideways. So I hope that's of interest. Thanks for the question.
Just very quickly, it might be a long way to go to 240 Madiba Street to go and buy bonds. If you have a smartphone, you can go on to rsa.retailbonds.gov.za. There are frequently asked questions there. You can actually buy the bonds, register online, and buy the bonds online up to R1 million. If you're buying more than that, you will have to do something else. So that is how it's done. I'm sorry to hear your story about the post office sending you from pillar to post, and they're supposed to be the agent of the treasury, but now you can go directly to the treasury via the RSA retail bonds. There was a question that came from Mahlatsi CBC, which had to do with the education that DG Mampo was talking about. We get this all the time. I've got no doubt that we have got to be doing more. What we can't do, and you said that the politicians, they make all of these statements. What we can't do is to compete with the politicians in the court of public opinion. Because the one thing politicians do is that they master how to influence public opinion. And if we try to take them on, it's like fighting crocodiles in the river. We know we will not be able to win. So we try to focus on the channels that we have to educate people. But I think, Mahlatsi, this question was meant to be answered by you, because what she is saying is that your communication team can do better. And for that, I hear her and I take that. We made an announcement about interest rates a day after the elections, and we didn't quite get attention until the weekend, as people were counting the votes. They said, oh, by the way, there was this other meeting that took place on Thursday. What did they actually say? And they started looking at that. But the point is that we didn't position ourselves to make an announcement before the elections, or after the elections. In November this year, when we go through the last MPC of the year, we release a schedule of our meetings for the following year and when we will make the announcement. So we released this in November last year. We didn't know that somewhere in February, the president will make an announcement to say the elections will be on the 29th of May, and that happened to be just a day before we had to make our announcement. And in a way, that became a challenge, because it said that our news will get lost in the noise. And some of the financial press and people in in financial markets said, are you going to bring the MPC meeting forward, or are you going to push it backward? And we said, no. They said, it's because of the elections. And he said, do you know why governors are appointed such that they go across the political cycle? Is because they are not supposed to make political judgments. So it doesn't matter that our MPC is a day after the elections. Our decision is based on numbers, is a technical process, and we were not prepared to shift it. And in a way, you could say that it was a blessing, because we were able to demonstrate that this institution is above politics and is about the mandate that the people of this country have tasked us with.
Thank you very much, Governor. Before we go, it would be remiss of me not to allow the student amongst us to get an opportunity to ask a question. Thank you.
Good evening to everyone and the House at large. My name is Kukurampai from Ketusunkondo School of Specialization. I have two questions. The first one is that how does the SARB set its policy? And then the second one is that does it track the Bitcoin taking place in the country? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Rashad, I'm sure you can talk about Bitcoin. David, I think this is an opportunity for you to explain how we make these decisions. I think they had Chris talk about it last year, and they just do not want to hear from him again.
So Bitcoin, there's so many terms, there's so many ways to express modern technology, forms of money and assets. Bitcoin, tokenization, central bank digital currency, and so on. So there are two parts here of what's happening in the world. When there was this question about what does the bank do, one of the most important things we do is we play an important role in what is called the national payment system. The national payment system has to do with your ability to pay on your phone, interchange between your bank and other banks, and we have ambitions to make sure that the price of a transaction that you as people make, that's a definition of financial inclusion, is something that we are very committed to working on. Now, some of the ways in which some countries have done this is through traditional technology. Others have used just what is called distributed ledger technology and so on. So that's the money side. The Bitcoin part, a lot of it has to do with another investment instrument. People invest in Bitcoin like a speculative asset in the way that they invest in gold and many other things. That part we're very concerned with. At one level, you must allow innovation. At another level, we want to make sure that people don't get caught out. There are people who invest in Bitcoin, but I think that one of the most important thing is when you make an investment, you've got to know the integrity of the firm you're investing in. Often it's very hard to do that with Bitcoin. So as a central bank, Fundis, as the CEO, are very concerned to make sure that there's proper regulation around these new developments like Bitcoin. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the question. I was seriously worried I was going to get no questions. Right, and I've got 2, so it's a successful evening, and thank you for saving it. Now I just have to make sure I don't talk for too long, because everyone wants to go and do the next thing. Let me try to tell the story like this. If you go back 150 years, the best monetary policy is meant to be just make sure your money is worth a fixed amount in terms of gold, just pegged to gold. And somebody can come to the bank and get gold out. And you just set your interest rates to achieve that gold peg. And in some ways that worked quite well. You had very stable inflation for very long periods of time, but you had no control over setting interest rates to look after the economy, to ensure there was enough money for the economy to function smoothly. You could even have problems where it's a busy time of year, harvest is coming in, but the money supply can't expand. So this was actually a very cumbersome monetary policy to operate. It's in some ways very easy for central banks. I think the Bank of England went something like 84 years without changing interest rates. Once, just 84 years of the same interest rate. We set it every 2 months. The gold standard, really failed at the Great Depression. This inability to manipulate monetary policy, to adjust interest rates to achieve other goals was a catastrophic failure. But over the next sort of 20, 30 years, economics got a little too excited about how much could be achieved with monetary policy. And there was this kind of post-war, mid-century period where people really believed there was growth and there was inflation, and you could choose anything between those two. If you want more growth, just have a bit more inflation. And so you're very powerful. Central banks can do a lot to give you growth if they're just willing to accept a bit more inflation. And it was a hard lesson to learn, but this was wrong in an important way. And the way it was wrong was that you could initially get a bit more growth for a bit more inflation. But then people said, oh, I see inflation's a bit higher. Prices are actually going up by 5% now. I'm also going to raise my prices by 5%. Then you stop getting growth out of it. So they said, okay, well, we still really want growth, so now let's go to 10% inflation. And then people said, oh, I see inflation's 10%. I'm going to raise my prices 10%. And so you keep playing that game, but it gets worse and worse. To get a bit more growth, you need even more inflation. And what we really learned from this is that central banks can only do a bit for growth. They can only really affect short-term growth. Over a couple of years, they can do nothing for growth. But they're very powerful at controlling inflation. So how most well-run central banks function today is they say, our long-term mission is to control inflation. That's the thing we can absolutely pin down. I can't decide what inflation is going to be exactly this year, next year, but over 2, 3, 5 years, fundamentally, it's our problem. If inflation's high, fundamentally, blame your central bank over a 5-year period. Growth, we can do a little bit for it in the short term, but deeply over 3, 5 years, it's not about monetary policy. It's about a lot of other stuff in the economy, education, power supply, and that stuff. So most central banks do this kind of thing where they say, I want to do what I can for short-term growth, and I want to make sure I hit an inflation target. And that's how our model works. That's how the central bank works. Thanks for a great question.
Thank you very, very much. I was wondering if I'd have to stand up for you, David. Thank you very much for the passion in answering that question. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings to an end our Talk to the SARB Soweto edition. But I would like to take this opportunity to invite Gugu. I'm hoping that you are in grade 11, and next year you can join our MPC Schools Challenge, because it is one of the ways that we are trying to educate at least young people to know about the work of the Monetary Policy Committee and the work of the South African Reserve Bank, but also importantly to encourage young people to become future governors and deputy governors, heads of departments of economic research, and advisors to our governors. And I'm hoping that this has at least inspired you to be part of that group. We go to every single province in South Africa when we do this. Also, I would like to invite everybody to visit our website, resbank.co.za. There you will find all of the information about the South African Reserve Bank. You'll also find information about our bursaries. We've actually just gone public with our bursaries for undergraduates and also for those students who want to study economics in the future. You can also find that information on our social media platforms. And as part of that education, we've even opened up a TikTok account that we are trying to grow to make sure that we are able to influence or at least educate South Africans about the work of the South African Reserve Bank. But I'd also like to challenge you. Next year, we hope to see you with many more people that can really benefit from this engagement. And we are hoping that it will not just be this bottom part of the theater that is filled, but even on top. But ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the South African Reserve Bank, thank you for sharing the evening with us. The conversations have really been rich, and I think the governors, the advisors, and Chris have really enjoyed it. But the conversations also don't end here. We would like to invite you to continue with these conversations outside. And thank you for attending tonight. Just wait.